What a week we just went through. I know that we always hear from comrades like it's another week where decades happen. That almost becomes too familiar. We really had some events here, some historic events that this country has not seen in 80 years. A general strike in Minneapolis, a political general strike that brought in the participation of tens of thousands. We're going to talk about the general strike that we saw on January 23rd. And then the events since then have really been an incredible whirlwind. Another brutal killing by federal agents of another worker, of Alex Preddy. I mean, sparking outrage. And then the fallout from that was really on the verge of a second wave of a second explosion, you could say, a social explosion in Minneapolis. Now we see Trump showing signs of at least a partial retreat. The White House has definitely been thrown into chaos because of the way, I mean, they really overplayed their hand. It's a retreat that we've rarely see from Trump because he always has one mode, double down, double down. You can see that he reached the limits of that, but there's a lot for us to discuss about what does this mean? What is the way forward? The future of this struggle, the possibility of a nationwide general strike, and what obstacles stand in the way. So let's begin by looking at the significance of what we just lived through January 23rd in Minneapolis.
Well, I think, first of all, the events of January 23rd in Minneapolis, people should see that as a boost in their confidence in their ability to change things and transform things. Because like you said, it's really the first time in 80 years where you could say there was some form of a citywide general strike. And that's what you saw, thousands of people were out there. And by the way, that was a very, very cold day. Yeah. So it's like a person being out in Minneapolis on January 23rd, it's worth 10 people out in much better weather.
It was a wind chill of -20. The news that morning was saying if you're out there for 5 minutes, you can get damage to your skin. I mean, it's extreme weather. Yeah,
that's right. You had many businesses closed. You had many people refuse to go to work, refuse to go to school. And it really showed it demonstrated the feelings of the people in Minneapolis, the feelings of the people beyond Minneapolis against what ICE is doing, against the Trump policies on going after people in this country that they call illegal. And it shows you the power when you get all these people together organized in a common, place, a common point. It just shows you the potential on how they can change things. And I think the momentum was with the movement. That was a response to what ICE has been doing and the killing of Renee Good. But then the next day happens.
Right. I mean, before we get into everything that's happened since January 23rd, just to say, that event was also the culmination, in a way, of a lot of preparation and build-up and self-organization in a quite a creative and ingenious way. I mean, in the lead-up to January 23rd, you had, and this is what really gives it sort of a working-class character, almost in an organic sense, because there's no real leadership that's driving this forward. This is basically the organic expression of the masses in Minneapolis. I mean, this is workers in their workplace talking about how to respond if ICE agents are spotted in their neighborhood, and the level of communication and coordination, all of these signal groups, that I think this is a historic thing. I mean, I don't know, you could maybe look at some revolutionary movements in other countries where you have a full-blown revolution that ends up bringing down a government. Maybe that would be comparable to the kinds of, prevalent WhatsApp groups and other social media, Facebook groups, but these signal chats, thousands and thousands of members on them. And it's not just chats. They're coordinating their actions. You have dispatches and patrols and these groups of people that are workers, but on their off time, they're volunteering to tail the ICE agents and acting as convoys. They call themselves commuters, You have there was an article in The Atlantic that was titled "The Minneapolis Uprising," and that author was saying, this reminds me of the scenes you saw in Tahrir Square during the Egyptian Revolution, talking about all of the what did he call it, an urban an urban orchestra, or talking about the creativity of the masses, the trainings that they're doing for self-defense, and basically training working class people, elderly people, what to do if you're in a confrontation with law enforcement in the street. I mean, it's incredible. All of these initiatives that we're seeing that really show what happens when you draw in the participation of tens of thousands of people who normally have nothing to do with politics.
In normal everyday life, people feel so powerless, right? People may be very angry about what's going on, but they feel so powerless. It's exactly events like this where people come together. And when they come together, they feel their power. And that's the achievement. That's the achievement of the 23rd, and nobody can take that away.
Yeah, it's also one thing that makes it different from other protest movements that we've seen is that it's not just a protest against ICE. I mean, this was a de facto political general strike against the repression of the state apparatus. We're talking about federal agencies. It's not even just a protest against police brutality of the local police department. We're talking about going up against the policies of the federal government and taking action to impede them at every turn. I mean, people are going in and intervening and making it impossible for this reign of terror to be carried out against immigrant workers. I mean, but it's also bringing out class consciousness. People see this as a working class issue. They're organizing in their workplaces. You have all kinds of workplace debates and political discussion about what this means and what is the contingency plan, what is the protocol. You know, we've talked, I think in the last episode, about anecdotes of the workplaces that our comrades are in, where they're like, ICE is spotted and they start barricading the doors and they take control of the situation. Basically, elements of workers' control coming forward in the moment, again, in a very spontaneous way. But all of that is what makes this so different from any kind of protest movement is you've never had this level of organization. A lot of times you have these gatherings, community gatherings or spontaneous demonstrations in the street. Something happens, people assemble, and then at the end of it, they say, let's break out and everyone get in touch with people that live on your block, and then they're getting connected. So these signal chat groups and networks are just becoming like this really interwoven. I mean, a lot of them, they were saying also that some of these networks began during the George Floyd days. So it's incredible. A place like Minneapolis that has this rich tradition that it's building on, that went through that experience, is now, as the comrades have said, it's taking off. It's picking up where the George Floyd protest movement left off, which was already the most advanced, the largest protest movement in U.S. history, one of the most advanced expressions of social struggle in this country that we've ever seen. We've talked about George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter movement for years. Now, this event has come along in the same city that in some ways it's already on a more advanced level. And so, this is partly one of our tasks is to digest the historic weight of this and to understand that this is class consciousness marching forward, making progress. I mean, the whole country is talking about the question of a general strike. The word general strike has entered the vocabulary of millions of people. That's a huge step forward for class consciousness.
Absolutely. First of all, one of the interesting things about a mass movement like this, or any strike, or any general strike, anything like that, is it breaks apart that alienation that people feel. Instead of just feeling like you're an individual disconnected from everyone else, now people feel organically connected to each other, and they get more power from that, right? They feel like we're all in this together, which is absolutely accurate. We have to share this planet. We have to live together, right? And it's that the working class comes to contact with each other every day at work, but under normal conditions, the boss runs everything and people are pitted against each other. A movement like that cuts across that. It brings people together, it unites people, and people start to see that they're not so powerless. They're actually very powerful if they work together and they use the power in the correct manner.
You know the book by John Reed, 10 Days That Shook the World? It's a
excellent book.
A classic description. A very vivid, it's like by an American journalist. So it's like, it takes you to the scenes. And you can
American
feel,
communist.
And you can feel the Russian Revolution, what it was like to be there. And that's why it's such a page turner, because it transports you there. And one of the things that he described that I always tried to imagine in my head was like, everything is politicized. On every street corner, everyone you talk to, everyone has something to talk about with each other. And they want to know each other's opinions. And there's like a ubiquitous political debate. Everywhere you go, you encounter it. Even late into the night, it describes, you over here, over there, there's people talking about it. There's people talking about it in this restaurant. There's people talking about it in the theater and in the waiting line. So I always imagine like sometimes you get a glimpse of that. There's a natural emergency or a disaster, and strangers start to interact. They start to talk to each other. What's happening now in Minneapolis is the most advanced expression of this, the most advanced specimen of this kind of politicized atmosphere that the U.S. has seen at least since the Second World War. So it is incredible to think what this means, because it's not over. We don't know if we've seen the peak for the time being now that Trump is starting to withdraw. We don't know if there's going to be another wave of the general strike. We certainly hope there will be, and we're going to argue how to do that a little later today. But the fact is, this is part of collective memory now. This is part of an experience that, it can't be taken away from the workers, from the young people, from everyone who's lived through this, and from the rest of the world that's seeing that the U.S. working class is capable of striking, of taking mass collective action, of getting organized, and they're taking these matters into their own hands. They're not waiting for the Democrats to step in or even for their union leaders to step in. The union leaders, if anything, have been dragged along by the momentum from below against their will. They've been reluctant. They didn't call for a strike as such. They said a day of protest. They were very careful about using pretty vague language to get on board with this thing. But, obviously from the workplaces, you mentioned the businesses that were shut down. The vast majority of them were small businesses. But still, what does that tell you about the will of the staff and the workers in these small businesses and of some of these small business owners? One comrade that lives in Minneapolis and grew up there his whole life, he said, every small business I've ever been to was closed. They said almost the list that I saw that published, as many as they could record from one of these websites, had nearly 800 small businesses that were closed. So it gives you a sense of this, a universal expression. Think about how synchronized that means. All these people were on the same page. Everybody feels that same contempt for ICE.
I work at a large multinational company that has its headquarters in the Twin Cities metro area. Up until recently, most of my coworkers didn't talk about politics at work very often. Suddenly, though, my workplace is buzzing with political discussion, and everyone is talking about how we can get ICE out of Minneapolis and what we can do to affect change in our own workplace. I had taken PTO for the 23rd. A week or so passed, and it's now a couple days before the day of action. And I get a message from my boss, and he says, "Are you taking the 23rd off?" And I said, "Yes, I am." He said, "Excellent." And I talked to him later, and he said, really, you shouldn't even be taking PTO on the 23rd, right? This is a general strike. He used those terms, general strike. This was like the trajectory over the course of the week or so after it had been announced. Basically, he told me, strikers don't take time off. They just go on strike. And so you shouldn't work or take PTO. And so I think this really shows the mood in Minneapolis. This was drawing in all layers to the class struggle.
Even in the face of these violent, people being killed, you still have this fearlessness, and this more than anything like a rage that's coming. The fury of the working class of Minneapolis. I mean, this is a powerful force that we've been seeing.
And people are learning that they have to rely on themselves,
right?
Not on this politician or that institution. They have to rely on their own selves organized together to change things. That's a very important lesson.
Absolutely. You've seen the capacity of the working class to draw conclusions and to learn from their experience. And that's part of why we're seeing things so advanced in Minneapolis is that this isn't the first time around. The whole country saw when Trump went in last summer, was it in June, right? Into LA, a huge provocation, a massive city with a huge immigrant population, and then he begins this reign of terror, this shock and awe attempt to distract from his economic failures. Eventually, this became a useful distraction from the Epstein files. I mean, he's trying to create a chaos that's unleashed from the White House so that he can sort of control the narrative and the headlines and all of this. But then it goes from LA to Chicago. In Chicago, they watch the LA experience. They learn from that. They start picking up tactics and techniques. Everyone has a whistle. Everyone has a sign in the window. Everyone starts, organizing and talking to each other. The patrols, people start tailing the ICE vehicles. People start communicating. In Minneapolis, they're perfecting many of these methods. They're seeing what happened in LA, what happened in Chicago. Now they're bringing it to the next level. What does this mean for the next city, the next place where Trump, if he deploys the National Guard? I mean, in some ways, they've really tested the limits in Minneapolis. They wanted to see how far they could go. I think they found out how far they could actually go before they risked having this thing get out of hand, completely out of their control, which is the reason that Trump actually ended up backing down. But yeah, I mean, in terms of the advanced level of the self-organization and the class consciousness. We've never seen anything quite like this in the U.S., at least for several generations. Well, let's talk about what happened after January 23rd. Instead of having an opportunity to really celebrate this massive show of force and this historic milestone, the very next morning, Alex Preddy is killed. He was shot in the back. He was shot 10 times. It's now come out that 2 of the officers involved in the shooting, which, by the way, it wasn't just the 2 of them. He was pinned down by a huge group of federal agents.
It looked like there were at least 6 to 8 agents on top of him, right?
Yeah. Well, 2 of them have been suspended. That's part of Trump's partial retreat now, trying to do damage control. But there's no criminal investigation being opened. One of the things that we saw was that Kristi Noem immediately said that he was brandishing a gun, calling him a violent would-be assassin, saying that he was trying to massacre law enforcement. I mean, incredible, baseless slander. This Gregory Bovino character, who's been the commander at large as ICE has been terrorizing city after city, gleefully throwing tear gas canisters himself and going toe-to-toe with the protesters and defending every move and every atrocity that they've been doing. He goes on CNN, and basically his line of argument is, "Don't believe your lying eyes." And he's saying that Preddy was trying to assault the officers, that he had pulled out his gun. I mean, just all of these, it's a slander of the victim that they just killed. And it was incredible. I think that was really part of the tipping point for public opinion nationally.
Again, it shows you the lie. You know, they're always talking about how free and democratic the United States is, and you have the right to protest and all that. Here you had someone who was really just there to protest, and I don't even think he actually originally went there to protest. I think he was in the area and he saw what was happening, and he joined in. They knocked down this woman next to him. He is a nurse, right? He worked for the intensive care unit of the Veterans Administration. Ironically, he's a federal employee, a member of AFGE, American Federation of Government Employees, and then they these 6 or 8 whatever ICE agents just ganged up on him. They had him wrestled to the ground, and that's, I mean, I'm basing it on what they're showing, all these videos. That's when the shots happened. They didn't have the shot when he was standing up, right? When he was filming what was going on with his cell phone. That wasn't when the shot, they waited till they had him on the ground, pinned him on, and then they shot him.
Yeah.
I mean, what is that if not extrajudicial killing?
That's exactly what it is.
You know, I mean, the thing is when Renee Good was killed, the government and, you know, the Trump administration tried this propaganda about that, well, it was really, she was killed in self-defense because she's using her car to run over the agent. Now, that again, when you see the film, it's clear that that's not happening, that was not the case. Absolutely clear from those videos. But maybe they had some people, they had enough confusion in the media that they had some people wondering exactly what happened. But then when the ICE actually kills this guy, Alex, the next day, and is particularly in contrast to what Noem was saying, what Bovino was saying, you know, what Stephen Miller was saying, and then people start seeing the videos that contradict everything that they were saying. I think people understood that both of these people were basically killed by ICE agents.
Absolutely. I mean, it's incredibly brazen. And in this day and age, you have all of this footage from all these different angles because everyone has a phone and everyone's filming it. And so there's no question about what you're seeing with your eyes. And they can analyze this footage, they can zoom it in. I mean, the one of the clips that I saw, you can see that the agent, that someone spots a gun saying, okay, he's got a gun on him. Once he's tackled and he's pinned down, and then they remove the gun. And this is what the New York Times reported this. After they've removed the gun, that's when he's killed. So he was disarmed and then murdered in the back. I mean, this is an incredible act of brutal violence.
Yeah.
And
aren't you innocent until proven guilty? These people are executing people even before they've been arrested.
That's right. Yeah. No, you've mentioned. Yeah. He first of all, Bovino goes on TV and says, well, he brought a gun to a riot. He showed up to the protest. This was premeditated. That was not a riot or a protest. This was a spontaneous. No one planned to show up there. This was called. It was, if anything, there was people surrounding because there's some kind of ICE activity underway. So no one planned to go anywhere. None of this was premeditated except for the ICE agents. They were the ones who had a premeditated role in showing up to that neighborhood. But then, okay, so suddenly it becomes a crime punishable by death to be carrying a weapon.
Of which he had a permit for.
Exactly.
And has a right to have that weapon according to the Second Amendment of the Constitution, right?
So your First Amendment right to assemble, to be there, to be observing the cops, to be filming them,
To protest, yeah.
that goes out the window. Your Second Amendment right, that goes out the window. Forget about the Fourth Amendment, searches and seizures. I mean, what did the U.S. Constitution actually do for Alex Preddy or Renee Good? Obviously nothing, you know? And that's this is part of consciousness. There's comrades that have relatives in Minneapolis and the comrades that are on the ground telling us about, you know, my mother or my elder relative saying, I thought we had democratic rights. I guess we don't. And people are drawing conclusions about what it means to live under a so-called liberal bourgeois democracy in the U.S. in 2026.
Yeah. Well, Lenin, I think it was Lenin used to say, life teaches. And the thing is that people, frankly, a lot of American workers had illusions, like in the government, in the whole system, because of the propaganda that they get from the media, from the universities, and from the politicians and everything. But the actual fact is this, that the real government in this country, it's not a government of, by, and for the people. It's not. It's a government of, by, and for the wealthy. It's a dictatorship of the wealthy over people. Now, it is bourgeois democracy. We would call it bourgeois democracy. What is bourgeois democracy? That means democracy for the bourgeois, democracy for that richest 1 or 2%. For the rest of us, it's a class dictatorship over the population. And that class dictatorship imposes itself in many ways over time. And this is nothing new. You know, people shouldn't get that. Like, this is not the first time the U.S. government has killed somebody, killed American citizens, right? Do you want to go back to the Civil Rights Movement? Do you want to go back to the Vietnam War movement, Kent State, right? Do you want to go back to, like, when there were uprisings in black neighborhoods in the 1960s, 1967, how many people were killed in Watts, in Detroit, you know? You know, we can go over, there are many examples of the U.S. government killing people who are protesting, who are opposing the guy. But we should be clear about what we're dealing with. This is not a government that really is controlled by the masses of the people of this country.
Yeah. Well, in a sense, it's like the mask is coming off. It's not that Trump is making the government worse as a more authoritarian thing. It's like, if anything, what Trump is doing is he's dispensing with all the niceties when we used to cover things with a veneer and say, well, you do have your democratic rights and these are sacred rights and we're not going to question. It's just what he's doing on the international arena as well, by the way. I mean, we don't get completely sidetracked here, but we're talking about the end of the liberal world order. What does that mean? We're not going to use a fig leaf of democracy and human rights. We're just going to say it straight. We want to take Greenland. We want to take, these are our interests. We're going to take them. Venezuela's oil. We're just going to, no regard for the question of rights and all. Well, the same thing is happening domestically. And really what's happening is it's the truth of bourgeois democracy that is coming out. It's not something that wasn't there before. It's just that they're getting rid of they're stopping to play the game and they're just being plain with it, really.
Yeah, I want to be clear to the listeners too. We're not saying it's not a dictatorship in the sense of a one dictator, you know, a Bonapartist dictator. It's not fascism, right? But what it is, it's a class dictatorship. The bourgeois democracy is a class dictatorship, and the bourgeois state imposes its rule. And it will, in fact, in terms of democratic rights, as far as the bourgeois state is concerned, it would like to take as many democratic rights away from people as it possibly can. Because democratic rights, they don't come from a piece of paper called the Constitution. They're not granted by the people above, you know, the ruling class to the masses and say, here's some wonderful rights. We want you to live a nice life. That's not the way it happens. All rights that people have are fought for. And they're won as a byproduct of struggle. And if people don't fight for those rights, at certain times the government will seek to take those rights away. So what we have here is a struggle over democratic rights. And this movement, part of this movement, is to fight, to push and defend the democratic rights of the population, the democratic rights of the working class, against the government of the ruling class.
Yeah. So in other words, to defend rights, you need to mobilize. You can only rely on the power of the working class, the strength of numbers and mass action, which is what we're seeing on the streets of Minneapolis. I think, and that's the point, is that you know, democratic rights aren't secured by, like you said, a piece of paper or like, oh, these are the rules of the system. You can't break the rules. I have rights. Truth is, you don't have those rights unless you can fight for them collectively, which is what people are doing. If it were a question of a dictatorship, if you didn't have a bourgeois democracy, if we were slipping into fascism, then instead of the working class having the ability to fight back, swarming law enforcement officers, organizing spontaneously in a massive way, and quite openly defying, what you'd have is the opposite. You would have people going underground, and you would have a movement that's capable of crushing the power of the labor movement, making the unions illegal, making strikes illegal. In some ways, they've already kind of made an effective strike illegal through laws like Taft-Hartley, which they passed after the last time we had a wave of general strikes. It's illegal to have a solidarity strike. It's illegal for workers across an industry to go on strike if it breaks the terms of their specific contract with each of their employers. You can't mobilize that power. So naturally, in this conflict between workers and owners, the bosses have, who have complete control of the laws and the state apparatus, have made it illegal to have an effective method for the struggle. And that's what people are learning in practice now.
Yes. It's ironic, right? 250th anniversary this year of the United States, right? And you take a look at a simple question like universal voter suffrage, right? So when did we get anything close to universal voting suffrage in this country? And how did we get it? I think you go back to 1776. Did we have it in 1776? No, we didn't. Did we have it in the 1800s? No, we didn't. It took to 1965 as a byproduct of the civil rights movement? That's when it took. It took almost 200 years to get just the right to vote. And that was not given on a platter. It wasn't given by a piece of paper. It was given as a byproduct of struggle.
Yeah, masses in the streets, linked with a lot of massive strike action in U.S. industry. So these traditions are coming back today. This is one thing I want to just say. There was someone who reached out to us after our last episode a week ago, who was saying that he described himself as a labor leader. He says that in the last episode, one of the hosts was flummoxed that the unions were not using the word general strike. He says, as a union leader myself, we are versed in labor laws such as Taft-Hartley, which to my understanding bans general strikes or wildcat strikes, and that reach across workplaces or industries. Endorsing such a strike could risk their charter and their future abilities to collectively bargain for their employees. It's basically a death sentence for the union. What would you respond?
Well, I thank that listener for writing to us, because it's a very interesting point. But let's look at this. First of all, Taft-Hartley. How many people know what Taft-Hartley is, or why it was passed? How many people know?
Probably
the fact is has the labor movement in the last decades, have they been alerting the working class to the existence of this law and how reactionary and undemocratic it is? They have not. They don't say a peep. Have they been demanding that the politicians in Washington repeal that? No. In fact, to be honest with you, the labor leaders, they endorse all these Democrats. The Democrats get elected to Congress, right? They have control of the presidency and both houses of Congress. Have the Democrats even tried to repeal Taft-Hartley?
On January 22nd, I attended a neighborhood-wide Zoom meeting that was organized in a Signal group chat for my neighborhood. I was able to raise ideas to expand the movement. I explained the need for any unions who are involved to reach out to other unions, do public appeals to get other unions involved. I explained that the unions who are putting this movement forward need to organize the unorganized, holding organizing drives. I explained that this strike needs to shut down the facilities that ICE needs to operate, such as the airport, the hotels, the restaurants. And then I started explaining why these labor leaders aren't calling this a general strike. I explained Taft-Hartley, and I was explaining that this law exists so the workers can never realize their true power as a class. I explained that this law only works in favor of the billionaires, of the capitalists. The Zoom meeting was getting flooded with hearts and thumbs up. And then all of a sudden, someone cuts me off, stops me from speaking. This person says, "These are all great ideas, but we're having this day of action tomorrow, so it's too late." And then I said, tomorrow we could make this happen. We're going to be at the Target Center, which is a venue that can hold 20,000 people. We could organize it block by block, neighborhood by neighborhood, elect delegates to form strike committees here. And of course, as I'm explaining this again, he cuts me off again. I got suspicious of this person actually, and I found out their name, which was Dan Engelhardt. Lo and behold, this person is running for office here in Minneapolis as a Democrat. The need for class independence within every stage of this movement is making itself known.
By the way, Taft-Hartley was passed under a Democratic president,
That's right.
President Truman, but we'll put that aside for another day. But the fact is the first thing the labor leaders should be doing is we should have a whole national discussion and a whole national debate, making people aware of Taft-Hartley and a campaign to repeal Taft-Hartley. That's the first thing. But coupled with that, there should be a national campaign on how to fight Taft-Hartley and beat Taft-Hartley, even if it hasn't been repealed. Because ultimately, you can pass whatever law you want, but the fact is that the working class has power, potential power, and that is the power to not do work. Nothing can happen without the working class. Nothing can be constructed. Nothing can be manufactured. No goods or people can be moved from point A to point B without the working class. It's the kind permission of the working class that Ted Grant talked about. It's a kind permission that allows society to function. There's a lot of potential power there. And just like other reactionary laws in the past have been struck down by mass movements, like the civil rights movement, brought that down. This law can also be challenged, right? And if you go on strike and they try to remove your charter, my question is the labor movement should have a massive campaign to defend that union. There are many ways to do this, and we're talking about this in Minneapolis without a lot of leadership, where the masses themselves, how ingenious they are in trying to come together through mass struggle to try to change things. This can happen on a national basis. And by the way, the labor movement has a lot of power beyond its numbers, because remember the railway workers? They were going to go on strike, and then Biden passed that law to stop. The railway workers, as a percentage of the population, a very small percentage, but if you stop rail freight in this country, you're going to have a huge economic impact. What is it? Something like 40% of freight is transported through the rail. 40% of freight. Don't you think that's going to have an impact on the economy? That small layer of workers have a tremendous amount of power. Longshore have tremendous power. Construction workers, manufacturing workers, hospital workers, bus drivers, all of these workers, they're strategically placed and have a tremendous amount of power. They could absolutely help to mobilize the rest of the population. So the labor movement has to be not fearful. They have to call out the government. It shouldn't be the workers who are afraid of the government. It should be the government and the employers that are afraid of the workers.
That's right. I would say to the labor leaders, are you still afraid now? After Alex Preddy was shot, after Renee Good's life was taken, after people are throwing out their own fear and pouring into the streets, risking their lives, risking their rights, are you still afraid to break this law that makes it illegal to have an effective strike action when the masses have shown their willingness to struggle? I mean, can you imagine if they had actually come out? And so here's the other scenario. Instead of just having a symbolic, like a day of action and hoping that you get a big turnout, which is what we had on that historic result on January 23rd, what if we had an all-out general strike? And now we're not just talking about the small businesses. It's a great sign of sympathy from the small business owners that they were willing to shut down. And you had this attempt at shutting things down. There was actually hundreds of protesters that showed up at the international airport in Minneapolis from the outside, attempting to block that. I mean, this was a massive mobilization, but it didn't affect what we call the heavy battalions of the working class. There is industry in Minneapolis and in Minnesota. There's the production, there was a lot of Fortune 500 companies, actually more than a dozen Fortune 500 companies and private companies like Cargill, food production companies, General Mills. You see these images of all these different cereal products and you realize they're all owned by what? That's General Mills. That's based in Minnesota. You have energy companies. You have national banks, U.S. Bank. There's different, basically the Fortune 500 companies that are based in Minneapolis area. If you actually organize the workers on that to strike at those companies, the ruling class nationally would feel the pain. And now you're talking about using worker power and generating real leverage that you're not generating otherwise if it's basically just the small businesses, the schools, and a mass demonstration in the street.
There was the IWW had an organizer, Joe Hill. He wrote a lot of songs and all that. He was executed by the state. But before he was executed, he said, when people were talking about mourning his potential execution, he said, "Don't mourn, organize." And I think the heads of the Minneapolis Labor Federation, St. Paul Labor Federation, those two especially should have got together immediately after Alex was murdered, and this is a union member who was murdered. If you allow the precedent of the federal government to murder a union member and it goes unanswered, what is that? That's a sign of weakness, not a sign of strength, right? So they should have immediately called a mass meeting, right, throughout the Twin Cities, said we're going to have a response to this, and they should have appealed to the labor movement statewide, to the labor movement nationally, to do something, to call for a national general strike and say, are we going to allow the federal government to just kill one of our members like this? Is that what we're going to allow? Or are we going to show them that we're not going to allow this? Imagine that if they had done that, I think they would have got an echo. Because look at nationwide how many people were angry and opposed to it. There were, by the way, on the 23rd and afterwards, there have been solidarity protests around the country, right? Even though it's not organized by the AFL-CIO, it's not organized but that's happened just organically, right? Imagine if the labor movement, which has federations in all 50 states, the District of Columbia, the New York City Central Labor Council has 400 locals, right? Was it 1.4 million members, something like that?
Over a million, yeah.
When you're going to tell me that they don't have the capability of organizing a massive protest? Yes, they do.
Yeah.
There's all this potential out there. The problem is the leadership doesn't see its role in that way.
Yeah, and when you say that, like, for instance, setting up a picket line, the way the law is, like, you have to make it permeable. You have to allow the scabs to come in, which means you're not actually paralyzing the workplace. Now, if you defy that, you're risking a confrontation with law enforcement, right? They could come, they could make arrests, then you have legal troubles. Like, you understand why the labor leaders say, well, we can't get into all this trouble. But what happens if that happens across an industry or across an entire city? The police are outnumbered. There's nothing that they can do. The power is suddenly in the hands of the working class. And that is the prospect that you would have faced in Minneapolis. And this thing you're talking about, spreading this general strike call nationally, is absolutely the way that we should be escalating this movement against what Trump is doing, and not just against future deployments of the National Guard. There is no guarantee that he's going to pull the troops out, that he's going to pull out all of these federal agencies that are on the ground. You still have over 20,000 ICE members and these other Border Patrol agencies, these masked thugs that are going city to city. There's no guarantee that there's not going to be another attack, another violent confrontation. There's no criminal investigation underway for any of these killers, that have taken the lives of Alex Preddy or Renee Good. And yes, as you've said, they targeted a union member. They've killed a federal worker after all the attacks on the federal workers union. I mean, and now for Trump to be trying to do damage control and say, we're going to de-escalate. And I had a phone call with Waltz and with Frey, and we're on the same wavelength. And, I'm sure that Waltz was saying, you need to help us here, because otherwise we're going to have a full-on uprising, and you don't want that, and I don't want that. And so they're trying to calm things down. But, I mean, you could see how very quickly this could have gotten out of hand.
Absolutely. The movement should take credit and should build its own confidence from like a semi-victory. That the fact that Trump has had to retreat a little bit on this, that there is a part of it that's a victory. But like you said, that's a victory in one battle, but this war is not over.
That's right. So the signal that Trump is sending, I mean, it's a complete vindication of all of these methods that have been employed on the ground in Minneapolis. Basically, he's acknowledging he has to pull back because this has been politically damaging for him. Public opinion has totally turned against ICE. I mean, he's losing, even his base is divided over the handling of this. People don't like to see this kind of violence and these masked thugs and all of this. But basically, what the signal that he's sending is, if you strike, if you have massive action, if you have local organization, if you fight back, then the federal government will pull back. He's sending that is the victory. That's the moral victory of this movement. That needs to be picked up nationally, because that's the whole, finally, the one force capable of defeating Trump, of defeating his every move, of defeating ICE and all of these raids and this reign of terror. That force has emerged, and it's the working class. That is the one force. And we've been explaining tirelessly, you can't lean on the Democrats. You can't expect the courts to be the guardrail on Trumpism. Only the working class and its own action, its own strength can put a stop to this. And now we have a model. Now the question is, Minneapolis, that needs to be replicated nationwide. and we need to bring in the heavy battalions of the working class. If you have the unions officialize the endorsement for genuine strike action and say, we're going to get out ahead of this, we're going to give this proper organization, I mean, you would have that again, we would have another level historic event, because that would completely turn the tables on the U.S. political landscape.
Absolutely. Just one statistic to back up what you were just saying before. You know, this poll was taken before the killing of Alex Preddy, but it was after Renee Good, right? And one of the questions was, do you think the tactics used by ICE have gone too far, or have not gone far enough, or have been about right? And overall, 61% of the respondents said too far. This is before Alex was killed. I'm sure those numbers are even higher now. And even among Republicans, 19%. So like it backs up the point you're making about the splits, and even among some of the MAGA supporters, the Trump supporters.
Yeah, I saw that the conservative governor of Texas, Greg Abbott, came out saying we need to tone this down, we need to do some damage control, we need to restore the legitimacy of ICE. They could see that, I mean, and Ted Cruz, same line of argument. There's a lot of Republican politicians, members of Congress, other MAGA sphere. Joe Rogan came out criticizing this. I mean, you can see that basically Trump's base, they see that now they're on the defensive, they're on the back foot, they've gone too far. These really despicable members of the Trump administration, Stephen Miller, who has been like the brainchild of this whole aggressive campaign, always defending it. He was also out there slandering Alex Petty, calling him a violent criminal and all of this. Well, now he's changing his tune too. He's also walking it back and saying, well, we have very clear protocol, and it seems that Customs and Border Patrol didn't follow the protocol, and basically throwing the agents under the bus. And instead of a few days ago, he was doubling down and slandering Alex Preddy. Kristi Noem, she's been removed from being in charge of the Minneapolis deployment. Now they're bringing Tom Homan, a border czar, who is not any better than any of these other people, by the way. I mean, they're really just shuffling the cabinet. They pulled out Bovino, but it's not like he's going to prison or that he's going to go to face any trial. He's just being back to where the previous assignment he had in California. So, I mean, the whole point is that you can see, yes, this is a victory for the movement, but it's a partial victory. It's not a complete victory. And to take it to the next level, what you need is to escalate the movement, doubling down on a general strike that really harnesses the power of the working class.
That's right. And I think, by the way, I've seen another poll where a majority of people believe that there will be no justice, and they're absolutely correct. There will be no justice in terms of the killers of either Renee Good or Alex Preddy. That won't happen. And once again, it's like we have no confidence or trust in the capitalist government to do anything and this government under Trump is doing these things. It was no better under Biden either. We saw all the attacks on democratic rights against people who were protesting on the Israel-Palestine issue, and you could see it just gets played over and over again. But we can have no confidence in these governments to solve any of these problems or to bring justice to anyone.
Yeah, that's right. The Democrats are definitely rubbing their hands together, hoping that they're going to profit from all of this in the midterms. But they're just playing games. They're playing political games. Now there's speculation that there's going to be another government shutdown because they're going to take a stand against the funding of ICE, just to make a big pageant. I mean, this is really just a big charade, because they're talking about, well, we're going to come out with a strongly worded statement, or we're going to see you in court. And they talk about using all of these institutions. But really what we've seen is none of that matters. None of that makes any difference. What actually matters, what really makes a difference, is the mobilization of the working class. And I think we should talk about what we would propose, how to escalate a mass movement, and what is a real general strike in a historic sense. What would it mean to actually paralyze industry and to mobilize the working class to its full capacity?
Well, a real general strike means that the labor movement would certainly organize from the bottom up and from the top down, and make sure that all organized workers understood, number one, that they needed to act in concert, and that means to not work. They would be assigned places to go, either to protest or to picket. and you would shut down industries, you would shut down communications, you would shut down transportation, in the sense that you'd have all these people going on strike, so there's nobody there to do the construction, to do the manufacturing, to move freight or people, and that's the impact it would have. Services would be shut down, and et cetera. And that's something that's absolutely can be done, and it's a very powerful thing. And if it actually was done on a national level, and by the way, we have had years like 1946 where you had massive strike waves around the United States, and in 1946 you had a number of cities that actually had general strikes. But I don't know if we've ever actually had a national general strike in American history. There was, the railroad strikes in the 1870s, but I don't think you can actually say that, yes, we've had that. So just the fact of having a one-day national general strike in the United States would be an enormous eye-opener. First of all, the working class would see the potential power that it has, but also the ruling class would see the potential power that it has. And that can easily be organized through the unions if you had a leadership that was willing to do that, right? Now, we don't have that right now. So that's something we have to do. We have to fight to transform the unions. We have to fight to change the leaderships and their policies and programs. You had the possibilities in Minneapolis with all these committees or these what would you call it, the signal groups and stuff like that, and the meetings that were taking place in the neighborhoods and the workplaces. If all of these neighborhoods and workplaces, if they had elected, let's say, action committees, and they had elected delegates, and you'd had all the delegates come together, not only on a citywide basis, I'd say in Minneapolis on a twin citywide, but get St. Paul in there, right? Get them all together, and then you had all these representatives together. They could coordinate things. Of course, they would appeal to the labor movement. They'd say, "Hey, join us, help us to coordinate this." I would think that the labor movement would have to respond. I don't think they could just turn their heads on a powerful collection of delegates, elected delegates from all these workplaces and all these neighborhoods throughout the Twin Cities. So you could see the potential of how a strike could be organized first in that city. But that if they were able to achieve that in Minneapolis, St. Paul, imagine that committee could make an appeal to New York, to Boston, to Chicago, right, to Los Angeles, and say, you guys do the same thing, right? I think it would have an enormous echo. You could see how the momentum would develop.
Right. The enthusiasm, it would spread like a wildfire from coast to coast, just like in 2020. Everyone was watching that. Everyone was watching events. Everyone was on the same page. And in this digital era, people are more connected. They're plugged into this news. They're watching these videos on their streams. And so, obviously, if the labor movement were to take a militant class struggle footing and to make this call, it would have a tremendous echo. Just looking at Minneapolis alone, for instance, we were talking about the heavy battalions of the working class. If you take just the three largest employers in downtown Minneapolis, that is Hennepin Healthcare, Target, and Wells Fargo. Those three together, that's 20,000 workers. Then you have the Minneapolis International Airport. There's 21 or 22,000 workers just in that airport. Now, on the day of the general strike, you had protesters basically descend on the airport, go to the outside of the Delta terminal and try to block it. But they didn't have an action committee that was rooted in the workforce on the inside. They didn't organize the workers in the terminal that are, the staff of the different shops, the flight attendants, the baggage handlers, the actual workers that make that place run. Obviously, there was sympathy among those workers too. You would have had reserves of support everywhere, but it wasn't organized and it wasn't, concentrated into some kind of a force that they could lean on. If you did have that action committee, that would have made all the difference, because now you're talking about workers taking action collectively, assuming the risk collectively as well, and saying, we're going to take it into our own hands. The same kind of thing with mobilizations at hotels. You've had a lot of spontaneous groups, and this has happened not just in Minneapolis, but just last night in New York City, there was dozens. I think I saw 66 arrested because at least 100 protesters swarmed into a Hilton hotel where they had discovered that they were, basically had ICE agents staying there. And so they're protesting it by occupying the lobby. It's a laudable action, but what you need to really do is organize the workers of the hotel, because they have the power to refuse service, to deactivate the key cards, to tell them, we're not just going to make a lot of noise and make it hard for you to get a good night rest. We're going to not let you have a roof over your head in this building. You cannot come in. The workers have the power to do that. You could have the same kind of strike action at every service that ICE, think about it, at every turn when they're going about their day. ICE agents have to eat, and they need to put fuel in their vehicles, and they rent these vehicles sometimes from like enterprise rentals. And so if you had the workers that are in the grocery store, at the restaurant, a lot of these small businesses, they do have ICE is not welcome here, and they're taking it upon themselves to refuse service. Imagine if this was done systematically. You could really paralyze the activity of ICE. They show up at the pump. The workers at the pump know because they're being notified by these by the dispatchers and by the signal groups who's showing up. They can shut down the pump. I mean, you can really make it impossible for ICE to operate. And just like that, you really would have the power to take it into your own hands to kick out ICE in a way that we haven't quite seen yet.
I will bet, by the way, that hotel, it's a Hilton Hotel in Manhattan, I will bet it's unionized because the hotel workers have a very big union in New York City among hotels. And wouldn't you expect that a lot of people who work in that industry are immigrants? So it's not like, don't tell me that these workers aren't going to be sympathetic. I am sure they're going to be sympathetic, right? The thing is that, yes, I agree. It's like if the movement appeals to these people, makes connections with these people, and then uses that as a way to build momentum for worker action, and worker action that's going to be backed up and defended by other workers. We're not going to allow these people to be scapegoats, because that's what some of the union leaders will tell these people. Don't do anything, don't go on strike, you're going to lose your job and all that. But what we need is a labor movement that's mobilized to protect these people. And I'm telling you that 400 locals and 1.2 million union members, or 1.4 million union members in New York City, if they're mobilized properly, people would feel that the labor movement has their back.
Mm-hmm. Just to say also that in New York City, these arrests that we saw last night, that was carried out by the Special Response Group. This is like the really brutal repressive wing of the NYPD. Mamdani said he was going to shut down that wing. This is a Mayor Mamdani now. I mean, it's time for him to start responding. He's in office now, and you have this massive struggle. He's come out saying, I'm going to do everything within my power to keep ICE out of here and to make sure that we don't have these kinds of atrocities. But what is he talking about using in his power? He's saying, we're going to have New York City policy, and I'm going to use my platform as the mayor. How about strike action? How about using his authority in his office to endorse the mobilization of the working class, to call on the AFL-CIO to mobilize, to call for the workers to take action and to support them when they do? You have this nurses strike taking place right now. It's actually the largest New York City nurses strike that we've ever seen in history. It's ongoing as we speak. He's also, he'll show up for a photo op at the picket line, but we don't need that kind of just a moral support that's just lip service. It would be nice if this mayor, who is a self-described democratic socialist, would actually turn those words into actions and give his endorsement for real systematic. I mean, they're still bringing scabs into this hospital. The whole thing is just this question of, you have these laws that make it impossible for the working class to fight back in an effective way unless they're willing to go beyond those limits. And in order to do that, you need to have like the authority of the organized labor movement endorsing that action so that they understand that they're backed. They're not going to be left out to face the penalties or to face their own legal troubles if they take this risk, because we're talking about a risk. But if you take it together, now you're harnessing your strengths and you can overcome all of those obstacles that are in the way, and their power would be enormous.
Our demand, back to our demand for a national general strike, this national general strike, it doesn't have to be just about the question of fighting ICE and the attempt by the Trump administration to divide the working class between those born here and those born elsewhere. But it could actually be a movement that could strengthen labor overall, could fight for full employment, could fight for a much higher minimum wage, it could fight for free education and free health care and housing that will not cost more than 10% of your monthly wages for the rent. It could be a campaign that would really improve the living standard of people. And by doing that, it would actually cement the unity of the working class.
Yeah, you would actually begin to effectively undermine the working class connection to Trumpism. Basically, the MAGA base, as we've explained many times, is a cross-class coalition. So there's a section of people who are working class people who had illusions in Trump and who voted for him hoping that he was going to improve the economic conditions. by putting forward these kinds of demands and connecting the strike movement to the cost of living and inflation, I mean, that's the way that you would actually be able to provide an alternative for people to turn to as they're becoming disappointed with Trumpism. The problem is, in the absence of that, what do you have waiting in the wings? People say, well, then there's the Democrats. I don't want the Democrats to get back in. We already saw the crazy inflation and the economic troubles, the general decline over decades that we've had in the living standards of the working class. The Democrats, they've exhausted themselves. They have no potential to turn this around. And it's a party of Wall Street. I mean, if that's the only alternative, then that gives more mileage to MAGA. What you actually need is a class independent alternative for the working class. And now that you're having these struggles, I mean, imagine if some of these leaders were to step forward and say, we're also going to break away from the Democrats. We're going to run in the midterms as working class candidates, in favor of this general strike action to get ICE out, but also to fight for the affordability crisis, to raise wages and to lower costs, and to have, basically a class war program that would, address all of these burning issues.
Yeah, and I would bet a lot of the workers who voted for Trump, one thing they admire about Trump, or they perceived him, as he was a fighter. He wouldn't back down. So this is what we need: we need labor leaders who are fighters, who won't back down. They won't back down against the government, against Taft-Hartley and all that. They're willing to face up against these big corporations and the wealthy people that own them.
So I think right now the thing that we need to look at to kind of wrap up is the question of what the RCA is doing on the ground. We have comrades in Minneapolis, and every day they've been on the streets. They've been talking to workers in their workplaces. They've been part of this movement. But what they're trying to do is bring something to the movement that really only a Marxist organization can bring, which is a class-conscious program, class clarity, and the lessons of, for instance, 1934, the lessons of the class struggle. Because that's the thing that is needed at this moment, when you have this huge willingness, all of this energy, a willingness to fight and to get involved. Comrades have explained, for instance, in the hours after Alex Preddy was shot, there was spontaneous movements for vigils. And if you see the scenes in Minneapolis, I mean, in working class neighborhoods, on every block, there was people just organically coming together. It was incredible to see. And this is across the city. And in the hours right after he's shot, there's clashes with police, there's tear gas, but everyone's responding and everyone's getting active, everyone's descending on that area. I mean, you have all of this outpouring of a willingness to take action. And so one of our comrades in Minneapolis, he gets on a group chat in his neighborhood, and he basically starts giving leadership and providing a perspective for, we should not just be mourning, but in addition to that, in order to avenge the deaths, we need to have a strategy for kicking ICE out for good, and we should discuss the way forward.
I immediately jumped into this group chat with about 70 other people, and I immediately suggested that we link this vigil with the greater movement and have a discussion of everybody at the meeting. Everybody agreed, and people even suggested that I write a speech to start off the discussion. So I immediately got to work on that. All sorts of people were just jumping right into organizing this thing. People were designing leaflets, were creating song lists and things like that. I was even giving some advice on how to spread the word. I explained that the small team doing the leafleting should be going door to door and actually enlisting the people that they find. If someone is enthused and wanting to come to the vigil later, we'll give them a stack of leaflets and have them spread it on their block and the blocks around them. And they ended up posting hundreds of posters and getting hundreds of leaflets out there as a result. I also called for an organizing meeting at a local shop near this park, and it ended up being like 13 people showed up. We had a political discussion.
He organizes a group of the leaders that are kind of run the logistics. They go to a local restaurant. The restaurant workers, they see that they're going to have a meeting there. They welcome them with open arms and they thank them for what they're doing. They say that 300 people attended the vigil that evening. Someone shows up with a fire pit. Someone brings the candles. Someone else has printed off sheets of paper with lyrics for protest songs. I mean, everything, he said, everything that we needed just perfectly came together on its own. And it shows you like the creativity of the working class. But what it also shows is you need leadership. You need a force that can say, in a systematic way, this is the way forward. Because the comrade at this gathering was discussing the lessons of 1934. Minneapolis had this general strike. that was led by communists, that had a strike committee, that used all kinds of very creative methods, and actually was the most successful general strike because it was led by communists. So what is needed is a leadership. I mean, if you could think this is like a microcosm. What if you could replicate this effect across Minneapolis and across the country? I mean, what we need is people in their union locals, in their workplaces, on every campus, putting forward these ideas systematically. And at a time like this, when it gets such an echo, I mean, the ideas that we're putting forward would resonate. Our call for a real general strike, for workplace action committees. I mean, you could see this would be picked up, but it needs to be transmitted by a force that has a sufficient size.
Trotsky said the party is the memory of the working class, and that's what we need to do, is build that memory. And what do we talk about memory? It's like you're learning the lessons of the past, not for just an academic reason, but to be able to use these lessons to apply it to the struggles today into the future. That's what we want to do. And I think I heard that the metro Twin Cities area is what, 2.2 million workers? About 4 million people live there, and about 2.2 million. So imagine if every collection of 500 workers, if you have one communist activist, one communist militant who's putting forward these ideas, who is able to explain to people the memory of past struggles and how they can be used in the future. Imagine the potential there. And of course, if you had that nationally, that would transform things completely.
Yeah, and that's what makes all the difference at a moment when you have this politicized atmosphere where everyone's talking and everyone's debating and everyone's hungry for ideas and perspectives, and they want to know what is the way forward, what do you propose? Anybody who can step forward and offer that immediately has an audience. I mean, this is what the comrade was explaining. Like, there was a huge, the explanation of the class war methods in 1934 was getting a big echo. And if you could put this forward in every workplace, at a time when all of these debates are already happening spontaneously, you could just imagine, I mean, basically we would be talking about the force that you would need to escalate this onto a much higher level. This is the need of a cadre organization, because we're talking about cadres, professional revolutionaries. I was thinking about that comrade explaining that experience, all of the branch meetings, all of the reading and discussion and the political education that led to that comrade having the ability to put that forward and to have the instincts in the moment to respond a certain way. This is what's needed, is to provide a training grounds so that when you're in these critical moments where there's a political vacuum and people are looking for leadership, our comrades know how to speak up, how to address a crowd, how to agitate. And this has been happening also across the country. I mean, you've had these mass demonstrations. Sometimes, I think the comrades estimated 10,000 in New York City. There was at least several hundred, if not several thousand, in Philadelphia. And our comrades are addressing the crowds. In Portland, I saw that there was also a speech that the comrades gave. I mean, there is a time right now where everyone's watching this and they want to hear what is the perspective, what is the way forward. Then it's a question of how strong is our ability to reach that, to satisfy that need and to put that message forward on the ground, not just with podcasts and digital tools. And we have our print paper and the new issue of The Communist that's about to hit the streets. These tools are helpful, but you need people to carry these ideas into the discussions and into this politicized atmosphere.
That's right. We need to build this party so it'll be able to reach more people in the way that our comrades were reaching people in Minneapolis.
Yeah, and if you think about, we've talked about how historic the events in Minneapolis have been, but we're just getting warmed up. Yeah. I mean, think about the coming events and the whatever kind of chaos Trumpism has in store for the next few years, the crisis of capitalism, the prospects for a catastrophic, you could have another Great Depression. I mean, the collapse of the AI bubble, the prospect of war and all of this imperialist adventures abroad. There's no shortage of forces that are radicalizing people day by day. And the reports that we're getting, the contacts that are writing us every day, almost every hour, around the clock, wanting to get involved because of what they're seeing on their screens, because of what they're seeing in their cities. There's no shortage of that process of radicalization of a layer that is looking to get active and organized. What we need to do is prepare our forces to be able to absorb that layer as quickly as possible, to train them up, to educate them. This is the efforts that our comrades are doing with public events on the ground, with meetings. They're recruiting, for instance, with that vigil that the comrade was helping to organize. At the end of it, he made an appeal for anyone that wanted to get organized in the ranks of the RCA. 6 people approached him afterwards. One of them ended up coming back for a debrief and joined on the spot with dues of over $100. And so this is, they also had a public event on the eve of the general strike. 40 people show up to this event, including a large number of contacts, and at the end of it, 4 people raise their hand that they want to join the forces. We've had similar events in New York City on the night of January 23rd. We had this massive demonstration, and the comrades, before they went into it, they were having a sort of briefing, just a political discussion to kind of get clear on what are we here to transmit. And so you're having a political discussion in a public setting. The thing is, there were so many people around that were hearing it and getting interested and coming in and joining the circle. It made it hard to actually get through the planned meeting, so they turned it into a public agitation setting, basically addressing large crowds that had gathered. By the end of it, 4 random people that had showed up and just encountered the comrades decided to go to the branch meeting with the comrades later that evening. One of them has since joined. So this is the kind of atmosphere that we're working in. These are the kinds of opportunities. And I mean, every single day, people are writing us, wanting to join, talking about how they feel motivated by events, by the weight of history. This is what we're seeing is an unfolding change in class consciousness nationwide, and it's going to produce a layer of people that want to get politically active, not just to protest, not just to voice their unhappiness about ICE, but they want to help transform society and understand what to do with this, how we can actually overthrow capitalism in our lifetime. I would appeal to the listeners, if that's you, if you're feeling motivated by events that you're seeing unfold, now is the time to get organized in the Revolutionary Communists of America. We have a huge task ahead of us, but we have a historic opportunity to make it a reality.
Communists of America is a podcast produced by our party, the Revolutionary Communists of America. If you agree with what was said in this podcast and you want to get organized, go to communistusa.org/join